discussion on new pathways to college and careers. Let me begin by inviting our panelists in no particular order. Aisha Tawqir, who is a student at the IB program in Beacon House. Ms. Aisha Hassan, who's the founder and CEO of Dream 3. Ms. Shanza Khan, who's social development specialist and founder and head counselor at ION IB. And last but not least, Rob Jamieson, who's head international channels and partnerships at Pearson School's Qualifications. So, thinking about pathways to college and careers, finding the right fit. Very briefly, I think it's a very important area. I've been teaching at a university now and not just at Lounge, but some others also for about 25 odd years now. And one of the things that students find out in the second, third year of college is things that they should have found out about in their school. What careers, how do you prepare for it, where do you go from there, what subjects, is it just marketability, are there other things to look at, how do you tell or convince parents that they should let students do what they want to do and not just think about what parents want them to do. So a lot of issues come up while they are doing their bachelor's and sometimes even master's. Maybe those things should be handled way before, and so one can understand why that in the early years of schooling, especially starting from middle school onwards, there needs to be more and more thinking about how do you craft your career. Because one thing is for certain, there's a very strong hysteresis effect to your decision making, as in where you have been can strongly determine or shape where you can be or will be. And so these steps have to be very carefully crafted. So a discussion on issues, hopefully of interest, and then we'll open up for questions. So let me start begin with Aisha Tawqir. Aisha, you're a student of IB. So let me ask you, what is IB giving you? How is it making you a better student, a better person? And how is it making you think about the future?
So IB is definitely teaching me a lot about time management and self-discipline, which I think is really, really important as a student or as a person, in general. Like self-discipline is the key to lead a successful life in any career that you are dealing with. So I think that's what.
And in terms of academics, when you must have friends who are in O-levels, A-levels, or
Yes.
in other systems.
Yes.
How do conversations with them go about what they're learning and what you're learning?
Very interesting. So I myself come from a very diverse educational background. So I did matriculation, and then I went to America for my exchange year. I just came back in July, and now I'm doing IB with help of Ma'am Shanze, of course, because I consulted her multiple times, asking her the same thing, A-levels or IB. So the conversations are mostly around which one is better, because obviously there's bias in everybody's, opinion that what they are doing is better. But in my opinion, I think IB is better preparing me for university, and it's for me, it's the best thing that I could have done. But when I'm talking to my friends from matriculation, they don't understand what I'm talking about, because in matriculation there's a restricted amount of things that you can do, a restricted amount of subjects that you can choose from. And in A-levels, it's kind of similar to IB, but it's more broad. So when we're talking to the A-level students, they are more prone to thinking that IB is harder and then they get into a complex, right? And I also did a psychology research on that for my psychology class, and it turns out that they do feel that IB is better, but the reason why they don't want to do IB is because they are afraid of how hard it is for some reason. And the American system is completely different, so yes.
If I can go to Mr. Hassan, you get students that are coming from various streams. I presume you have IB students, though they must be smaller in number, but also students from A levels and O levels as well.
Yes.
How do the two compare? How are their pathways different, if they are?
I think the biggest difference that you'll notice immediately in an IB student is that they've actually been taught in some way or form what it looks like to think critically, right? The A-level syllabus is so standardized, leaving no room for critical engagement or thought, right? They're asking you to prepare yourself to deliver just a specific result with no room for individuality or personal thought or engagement. IB students, because of the encouragement of, especially at the diploma level, the theory of knowledge, with CAS, they are, and even with, in the MYP, when they tell you to use your knowledge to apply your learning to the real world, that's the starting step, that's the foundational block of helping students take their learning and make it meaningful, right? Knowledge just for the sake of knowledge ends up being counterintuitive. It's only if you can apply that knowledge well. And I think IB students, it's part of the curriculum to encourage them to do that versus the advanced levels.
And do the universities that you apply, that these students apply, do they also make distinctions in terms of where the students are coming from?
Not yet. I think, although I do believe that students who go through the IB program are generally much better prepared to deal with the applications and will be at first more successful when they reach college. Okay. Because as Aisha spoke about earlier, they have some life skills that are absolutely necessary to apply when you get to college, right? So time management is a big life skill that you must learn, and the IB is actually attempting to teach you that along the way.
So I'll have to do IB again, get time management.
Yeah, me too, same here. But I think universities are not making distinctions yet because majority of students coming from Pakistan are still studying the Cambridge or the matriculation board, right? Which means, and to discriminate against them would be unfair. Sure. So they're assessing them on the basis of what Cambridge or EdXL is given them as an assessment, and if they're doing well there, they're hoping that once they come to college, whatever skills are missing, the college process will teach them that.
Shanta, if I could come to you. So IB is still very small in Pakistan, only about 15 schools or something like that. And there's a lot of literature that, at least some literature that I've seen, that IB requires a lot more preparation for the teachers, for the school, and so on. And so, if, let's say, if you have various streams of students that you are talking to, some want to stay in Pakistan, want to go into engineering or medicine, some want to go abroad, and even abroad there's variety in terms of the programs. So how do you then start linking their choices of these systems to where they want to go, and especially those who want to stay in Pakistan, because the majority clearly does that?
So Faisal, actually one thing I have seen is the data on the number of IB students which are accepted versus those who are coming from the OA level stream. And there is marked differences in acceptance rates as far as not just US colleges are concerned, but internationally as well. So
but that can be self-selection, right?
So I'll just touch your last comment a little bit and then delve into this. So whether it is, not just talking about the Ivy Leagues or the top 20 or the top 50, but even if you look at mid-tier colleges, there is a significant difference in acceptance rates between those who have completed the IB curriculum versus those who are coming from the OA level stream. The data is there, it's publicly available, and whichever system you prefer or not. Then to the point on how would you guide a student on which system is better for them. So as a mother of three, I actually have 2 children who are in the IB system and 1 who's in the traditional OA level system. And as much as I'm a fan of the IB, it is not for everyone. To Aisha's point, it is a much more rigorous program. The curriculum is much more rigorous compared to the OA level. If you look at DP, for instance, at the A level, you're required to do 3 subjects. Some children do a 4th optional one if the schools are allowing it. But at the DP, you're doing 3 standard level, 3 higher level, an extended essay, a CAS, and a TOK. There's no debate on the level of not just time management skills, but the analytical capabilities and the research level that is required for the IB. Not every child in Pakistan is prepared and geared to go down that stream. And so students who are not, they're really encouraged to think out of the box in the IB. And I particularly, as an economist and have been trained on that, would never imagine teaching DP economics, because criteria A is the knowledge and theory, which all of us are very well familiar with. But when you apply it, that is something that has to be taught. And currently, in terms of your question, I see IB increasingly becoming popular in Pakistan because of the international demand, but it's going to be a slow go. There are multiple constraints. One is the financial cost involved with it. The other is the number of certified teachers who can actually train the IB curriculum. So that's also going to hamper growth for IB. So it's, and then as far as the access is concerned, unfortunately, it's only available thanks to the financial limitations to a certain self-select group of Pakistanis. Where does everybody else go, who can't afford to give that bills? And I think that actually the future lies with technical and vocational training and embedding that into the curriculum. And that is where you will increasingly see programs like BTech for Pearson or school systems like the enablers who are incorporating skills into their middle and high school curriculum for actual employment once you graduate.
And just a reflection on the matriculation part. I mean, the route for matriculation, FSC, and local either medical or engineering schools, is that better than, say, going through the OA levels route? And
so as far as I tell all my students, if you're planning to do medicine in Pakistan, then you're better off not doing the IB. They're going to have a much harder transition into the medical system or engineering system within Pakistan. In fact, if that is the route you're planning to take, it's better that you are in the intermediate FSC stream.
Okay. So, Rob, coming to you, because I think a lot of these questions are actually coming. What are the kind of skills that really students should think about as they transition to higher grades and then to think about future and university, one kind of university or college or another?
Yeah.
And secondly, how do they combine that with the kind of streams that are available in Pakistan? Is it additional things that they need to do, or is it that they do, this can be done within the other systems that are available?
Well, thank you for the invitation today, and thank you for your question. The first thing that I need to say is that I'm here as the representative of the UK O-level and A-level system. In fact, we don't do O-levels anymore because most of the rest of the world does international GCSEs. O-levels actually were phased out in the UK in 1986, so they only survive as an entity in a very small number of countries. The equivalent is international GCSE, and that's got absolutely worldwide recognition, which leads on then to international A-levels. To take the point about the balance, we've been comparing IB and the UK qualifications route, and I think the point that Shanza made is very strong, that one of the key decisions you have to take at the outset in which route you take relates to whether your strength is as a generalist or as a specialist. Clearly, what happens with the A-level route is that you narrow the band of subjects that you're going to specialise in and go rather deeper into those. Which is why, for instance, I think you're right to say, in terms of, for instance, being a pre-prep for medicine, choosing already the subjects that will give you a depth of knowledge in a specific area is really good. But it doesn't have the broad spread of the IB, which I admire enormously for its holistic attitude to education. I, for instance, was very grateful for the obligation that I had at the time. The IB didn't exist when I was a lad, to have to do A-levels, because I was definitely not a generalist. I was so poor at maths and sciences, I couldn't give them up quickly enough. And I specialised in languages, which led on to what I've done in education for the rest of my career. But the point that you asked specifically about skills is, I think, traditionally a point of vulnerability for UK exams, because one of the great strengths of the IB has been that broad, holistic approach, and also the express development through the subject theory of knowledge, of developing self-awareness as a learner. And to be honest, the traditional view of UK qualifications is no longer as fixed and static as you may believe. And it's part of the reason why I'm here in Pakistan, because Pearson EdExcel, we're growing enormously, because the suite of exams that we've developed now have integrated, and explicitly we did a big project before we launched these exams to find out what people needed from secondary school qualifications in higher education and in the world of work. And we spoke to thousands of experts at school, university, and industry levels about what they needed from work. And the problem that arose was that traditional exams always look backwards at the achievements over the past 2 years of learning or 3 years of learning. And what students really needed, the schools may need that to validate their programs, but there was a lack of a bridge between what schools did and what universities did and what employers needed. So in our latest suite, and this, to be honest, is a bit of a nod to some of the approach from the IB, which has been so successful, we built in a skills thread in every subject, preparing students not only to be specialists in subject knowledge, but also to be better prepared for the gap to university, to be better rounded students, to have a greater awareness of the sort of theory of knowledge learning skills that they needed to succeed. So don't think of the British system as being ossified in a very traditional way. I think part of the reason that we're growing so much in Pakistan, and I should just thank also Beacon House, because we've just within the last couple of months signed a memorandum of understanding to launch a big pilot project with Beacon House in schools. So there are alternatives to an old-fashioned way of doing things, and we're I would say we're very progressive, and perhaps it's more now a choice of specialist versus generalist rather than old-fashioned versus modern, if I can put it that way.
But Rob, if I may also ask, there's a conversation that I keep hearing, and part of it as well, that in some ways Pakistanis now know how to do OA levels or GCSEs. They have cracked the system in some ways, and so a lot of them don't really go to the, say, textbooks, but they go to the notes and past exams and so on. And hence the number of A's and so on have gone much higher than what used to happen in our in very old times. So how is the system responding to that kind of conversation?
You're right, we were having this conversation just before we started. We were saying that the system has trained Pakistani students to be great tacticians. They're very good at working the tactics of how to game the system in a way. And one of the things that I was in a conversation with earlier this week was saying that even when an exam board tries to elicit some creativity by asking an exam question which says, give your opinion on the first thing that teachers do is, you tell me what opinions you're going to want to say, and I'll tell you what to prepare. You can't go in with an unprepared opinion to an exam. We can't risk that. So you know, traditionally the idea is it stifles your creativity. You daren't risk individuality in the exam room. So there's a challenge of the system, and actually of the nature of exams. And because the way that exams would be done has been so familiar, then everyone knows how to play it. So the first thing you do is have to break the model, because people teach to the exam. So as an exam board, you have a great responsibility for the whole way in which classes are taught. And therefore, if your syllabus is too narrow, your outcomes will be too restricted. So the responsibility for the exam board is to make the syllabus broader from the outset. So let me tell you one of the things that we changed and that we did when we revised our latest suite of A-level exams. And this is, I was speaking to a group of students this week, and they really saw the value of this, that we make our international A-levels modular. So what that means is that rather than saving up, storing knowledge, remembering it, cramming, revising, and then dumping it all on an exam paper at the end of 2 years, that is testing a very narrow range of skills. And in fact, the core skill is memorization. And when else do we need to memorize that much in the rest of our lives? I was asking this question to a group this week, and we came up with 2 examples. One was mine when I tried to memorize my speech as a best man at a wedding. That was a hard act of memorization. And the one before that, which other people shared with me, was when we had to learn a part for a play. And apart from that, in real life, nobody ever has to remember as much as you do. So we're rewarding people who are good at something, knowledge-based, that people don't actually need very much in life. So modularity in exams aims to get past that you take exams by module. So for instance, A-level maths is 6 modules. You can take them over 3 exam periods over the 2 years. So you're testing people's ability to be the best version of themselves in each module. And they can retake every module until they've got it as good as they like and hand in the final qualification. So that's the sort of way in which we're introducing flexibility that reduces exam stress, for one thing, and allows people to be the best version of themselves rather than playing the game in a traditional manner.
Thank you. I shall come back to you. So one is the stream and academics, right? What else are you doing to prepare for the transition from school to university?
So, then
Outside
again,
of academics.
time management, then again.
Okay.
And understanding people, I think in IB we have, so then again, the individuality.
Forget
of
IB.
opinion. Okay,
Tell me, what do you do the rest of the day?
I study that.
What else do you do? You study all the time?
No, not really. So socialization is a big thing, right? As Mr. Rob said, the individuality of opinion. So IB, forgetting IB for a second, sorry. I'm an IB student, I can't forget IB. It's everywhere in my life.
So when you think about college admissions
Yeah.
and college processes for admission,
Yes.
do you worry about showing them that how are you going to show them that you are this kind of person? What will
Yes.
be the things that you would want to get across to them in your application?
So I'm more comfortable with my opinions as a person now because I have that individuality of being okay with what I think is right and not really taking in everybody else's opinion in regard and basing my opinion on that. So I think that has really helped, so I would definitely show that in my application processes. And other than that, the ability to self-discipline myself and allowing myself to come out of this, the bubble that I created, and being able to do what I want to do just because I want to do it, not because I think it will be a great thing on my application process, forgetting about that for a second, and then just realizing what are my interests and if I really want to do this for myself.
Ms. Hassan, if I may generalize from there, when you are guiding students, what kind of guidance other than academics comes through? What's the importance of, say, social work, sports, recommendations, other things that students do? And how do they tip the balance if everyone has got a good A-levels or a good IB?
Yep. Dr. Vari, I'm glad you asked me that, because when I came back and started working in this industry, that was the largest gap that I noticed, right? So 99% of schools in Pakistan are doing really well in whatever board they're promoting, whether it's A-levels, edXL, matriculation. They're doing mostly really well in helping students get the grades. I can't say the same for when it comes to helping students build their profiles and become the best versions of themselves for college, right? I think if I name a couple of schools, Eastern for many, many years, because of its established programs and investment in sport, definitely gives its students the edge there, right? And we were talking about this last night at the dinner. Somebody was saying, if you're good at debates, there's always a place in school for you at any school, because debates is an extracurricular that's valued. But if you're not a sports person and you're not into debates, then what do you do? To be honest, I think schools are trying to find their own answers to these questions, but what we do as career counselors, and I'm sure Shanza can attest to this, is on a personal level, we run a program called simply profile building, where we take a student, we assess their base level skills, academic and non-academic, and then we find them programs that they can do to build themselves further, right? So this can be as simple as community service, where you, for let's say whatever reason, you are really focused on helping people who've suffered from Alzheimer's disease because somebody in your family suffered from it. So we would help them build a project where they can make a tangible impact on that community, right? Academically, how do you explore your interest outside the classroom? We try to encourage students to do research, right? Engage yourself beyond the knowledge level given, but and reach out to ideas in the process for that. But I think holistically, that is the space where schools need to, I believe, on a personal level, invest more time and energy, right? How do you take a student, and whether they want to be a chef, or they want to be a musician, or they want to be an economist, how do you help them find that thing that sets them apart or makes their brain tick, and then develop that, right? And programs to that end need to be created in-house.
So would that add to the burden that students carry at that level?
Not at all. I mean, if you look at, so Rob was talking about generalist versus specialization, and in my mind, because I work in college counseling, it was almost the debate between going to the UK and going to the US for your undergraduate, right? Because the UK is a specialized degree, and the US is the generalist and then specialized, which gives you, in my opinion, a more holistic education on the world, which is important because now it's no longer enough to just be a doctor. You need to be a public health specialist as well. You need to know about human rights, so on and so forth. So I think like where the world is moving, education systems have to adapt to that end, right? And there's a very famous talk by Dr. Kenneth Robinson that says that, maybe we should upend the entire system altogether because it was built during the Industrial Revolution and it's not doing the job anymore. So whether it's putting more burden on the schools and in addition on the students, it's absolutely necessary, right? You don't want to send students to college unprepared for the future that awaits them. And I think if we start looking at these things now and start adjusting ourselves step by step, obviously not a complete, upheaval altogether, that's the only way that eventually our students will come back to Pakistan even and become change makers and thought leaders, versus helping a system that you all know is flawed in very many ways continue the same grind.
If I can come to you, a different version of the question, but going back a little to academics. So even within academics, is there, so Rob talked about specialization versus generalization, and that's in terms of subjects and how many you do. But what about the combination of subjects that you take? I mean, does that have any relevance to create a better student and a better person applying for, say, colleges and so on? Any literature, any hard sciences, math, what are the kind of mixes that people should look for?
So, the admission process has become so competitive that previously the generalist kind of was acceptable. So the norm in Pakistan continues being that as long as you have a strong basis in the sciences, you can do anything. And I can, from personal experience over the last few counseling cycles, tell you that no longer even in the extracurriculars, if you're a generalist, if you're doing dramatics, if you're doing sports, it's no longer sufficient. It is the era of the spike. This is what the literature is saying. You take one thing, whether it is academics, whether it is your extracurriculars, and you have to be really good at it. So on the academic side, if you are looking to get acceptance into a US university and you're saying, I want to do business, then your subjects at the A levels or the DP levels have to be in sync with that. What I have found is that parents are guiding their children that, you know what, take the sciences. You can always go ahead and take business at the undergraduate level and you'll be fine. But the problem is, in order to get accepted into this competitive university, when you have University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, looking at a child who's taken a combination of business, economics, and math in A levels versus physics, chemistry, and you're making a narrative, I am passionate about business. Well then, that combination of the sciences is not really working. Not only is it the combination of subjects, it is, in today's world, what else are you doing on top of that? So it has become so competitive that now universities are looking like, okay, if you're planning to do business, are you an entrepreneur? Have you launched that particular app or a particular business? What kind of international competitions have you competed in to show your proficiency? And how can you show your proficiency if you don't have those subjects? So to make the case that I am passionate about pursuing business without having taken those core subject areas becomes increasingly difficult. In the UK, you have subject and grade requirements. And this is, I've seen, it's a little unfortunate that sometimes students are not even aware that they should have been taking a particular subject at the time of subject selection when they are choosing what they want to apply to as a major at the undergraduate level. So if you're planning to do aerospace engineering, maybe Oxford requires you to take further mathematics. The school perhaps doesn't even offer that. And then when the student is applying, they discover, oh no, I'm not even eligible to apply. So combination of subjects, very important. Can you get away with it? Technically speaking, the US doesn't require you, this is the fun part about the US system. It doesn't require you to have mandated subjects, but in order to get in, you need that strong combination. In fact, there's a box in the Common App which says you can go in as undeclared, and you actually don't need to select your major till your junior year, your third year. But I joke with my students that unless you're a WASP, white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, which none of anybody in the audience is, and you're a brown South Asian, you had better come across as being very focused.
And I'm certainly glad I did my university long ago. It was getting harder to get in. The other thing was, I also wanted to do the grades at Oxford, but they said you haven't done Latin and Greek, which obviously was never offered in Pakistan at that time. So yeah, that makes it huge difference. I see a lot of A-level students coming through with Urdu and subjects that that they feel are easier to do, but then they want to go into some of the sciences and some of the other areas, and it's just very hard for them to make that switch then at some point. If I may now come to the edexcel part and ask you a little about, so if somebody is doing IB or A-levels or even matriculation, are there combinations of other courses, small things, specific courses or modules that they should think about doing from other systems and combine somehow either systems or certifications?
Obviously, the greatest constraint is the course system that you've chosen to exist, you know, to develop within. The IB is a very complete, very holistic system, and it includes within it the opportunity to develop personal projects and so on. People don't frequently know, but a growing qualification in UK exams is called the extended project qualification, which does offer that opportunity for a student to choose their own project and to develop it alongside traditional O-levels, or should I say GCSEs, and A-levels, because it gives them an opportunity to choose a subject of their choice and show how to construct the whole project, build the logic, build the arguments, do the research and so on. So that opportunity, you know, as I say, the traditional image isn't as fixed as it used to be. But also, I mean, one of the things that is entirely clear from people's progression routes is that already the choice of subjects between A-level and university isn't quite as narrowly prefixed as people might think. There's more flexibility allowed. And clearly, at the next stage, one of the things, we did a lot of research, as I was saying, with employers. At the next stage, when students leave university, employers very, very frequently say, that's great that you've got so much deep knowledge in a specific area. We're not going to use very much of that, actually. What we're really interested in is how much of the skills have you developed to be able to be successful in the world of work. And employers were telling us, not only through schools but through higher education, there's not enough of a link. You know, because I was saying that each system looks backwards rather than forwards, and they don't speak to each other. Schools rarely speak to universities, and universities, well, it depends. Applied universities speak to employers. A lot of more academic streams don't speak a huge amount to employers. They look back at achievement within their own terms. And the requirement, and what we're trying to begin to build in at our level, only between sort of up until the end of schooling, is to start looking forward and focus much harder on the skills for success. So some of the research we did was 54% of companies in our research said that skills shortages affect their ability to serve their customers. 1 in 3 requirements in a job posting is a soft skill. And employers were telling us these are not sufficiently prepared through the education system. So these are the areas that I think there needs to be an increasing focus. We've started, but there's a great deal more still to do, I think, in terms of progression routes. The last thing I would say, we've talked about EdExcel, that you mentioned BTEC and vocational routes, and it's really valuable now that vocational education is rising in its status. Not quickly enough. It used to be thought of as very low grade and academics with a high grade. We have to stop that way of thinking. Some of the most productive new careers are coming from vocational routes, and some of the greatest successes will be for students who are well trained in a vocational rather than an academic stream. And so BTEC paths into university will be really valuable.
Give a few examples.
Well, we offer BTEC qualifications, for instance, that offer university entry. Straight away, everyone used to think, well, if you're going vocational, you won't get to a high-class university. High-class universities are recognizing for professional-oriented qualifications the huge value of BTECs. And we do them in very forward-looking subjects, you know, 21st century skills like esports, sports management, creative media production, tourism and hospitality. One of the research, this is rather frightening for traditional educators, this came from the World Bank, saying 65% of 12-year-olds in 2015, so it's a few years old, will do jobs that don't yet exist. So we have to stop teaching people for our pasts and start teaching more holistically for their futures. You know, think more about skills and less about content. Because for one thing, content has been outsourced to our phones, This is where content now is, knowledge is. Skills are what the students will need to succeed in the future. The focus will increasingly go in that direction, I think.
So Aisha, one more question for you. You said you shifted from matriculation to IB.
I had a gap year, and I went to America, and so then
And
Yeah.
was it hard?
very, very
What
much.
was the hard part?
So, being a matriculation student, it was always just, content, and then you have to memorize that content, no individual opinion at all, and you just copy paste everything that you remember, and then that's your grade, basically. So when I went to America, I was very lost because we did not have a proper structure to follow. So I was like, what am I supposed to do? I remember with every teacher, after every class, I would be like, so what do I have to study for the test? And they were like, anything that you want to. And I was like, how does that work? And so I think that actually prepared me a lot to be in IB, because here we do have a little bit of structure. We know how to make the content, we know how to do the research, but it's how you want to do it and when you want to do it. So we have that liberty and freedom to that. So I think that's kind of the major part of my transitioning. Yes.
Chansey, so from there, tell me, what will the school of 10 years, 15 years from now look like in terms of preparing our children for the future?
Is that a theoretical question, or what do I see happening on ground?
Be a visionary and give us your visions.
I would like to see vocational and technical streams incorporated into education
At school level?
at the school level. So Scandinavian countries do that already. In Germany, in grade 5, there is a bifurcation. There is a school exam which determines whether you're going to continue towards the traditional stream or you're going to go towards the vocational stream. Our problem in Pakistan is the mindset. We think that if you're in the vocational stream, it is something which is like China. Second, it's like made in China, it's not good enough. And so ideally, I would like to see a lot more technical skills incorporated.
Something that Rob was saying.
In things like, so I studied in convent, for food and nutrition, instead of just food and nutrition, I would like to see culinary arts and event management incorporated into that. If I'm taking computer science, I would like to see it, maybe linked with specifically biotechnology or bioengineering at the high school level. And I think it is very doable. I think there are models which already successfully exist, in the world that we can learn from and incorporate. Whether do I see that happening in Pakistan in 10 years or 15 years' time? Unfortunately, Faisal, no. I think there is such a big lag. We are still debating on fundamental education issues at the policy level that we are not geared towards thinking 10 or 15 years down the line in the future. And you know this best, more than most. Policy recommendations remain on the shelf and are a victim of political implementation.
So actually, before we go to the questions, where it's almost time for the questions, just a reflection on, so I work a lot on variance in ability, right, where individual work, sort of study paths become more important. This includes challenges in disability as well, but not just that. Any two children would be different from each other, right? Now, think about the streams again and the kind of systems we have, and tell me which one in some ways caters to those possibilities of children being very different from each other, learning at their own speed, at their own pace. Which system would be best to sort of cater to the entire spectrum of children that we have coming in our schools?
Before I give my opinion on what I think is the best system, I'm going to say the most important thing for me in any education system, in any school, are the teachers, right? And I don't think we've highlighted that enough yet. Teachers are critical to individual growth. what a singular teacher can do for an individual's development can be life-changing, regardless of what system they find themselves in. So I think that's something that we should really invest time, and then providing our teachers with the right kind of support and training is something that all schools should really invest time in. Having said that, beyond that, I think personally I'm a proponent of the IB, because for me, when I went to college, all of my struggles, or many of my struggles, were tied to seeing people around me, knowing basic critical thinking skills that I did not have, right? So it's, for me, a system which encourages a child or gives them the ability to think on their own is, for me, regardless of what happens after that, the best system, right? And I think when I did my undergrad at Columbia, and when I went there, I would see lots of students around me, and I would think, why couldn't more of my friends end up here? What did they not have? What it boiled down to at the end of it was they did not have the ability for individual thought, and also to present themselves and who they are in the best way possible on paper. And if you have a system that allows you to do that, no matter what struggles you may face, you will find your own pathways to success. And I think holistically at this point, when you look at although I honestly, after this conversation, Rob, I have to tell you I'm becoming a much bigger fan of edXL, and I'm going to spend some time and energy encouraging schools to look into it with the forward-thinking aspect that you guys are accommodating for, and I really, really like that. But as of now, in the way that it exists, I think the IB, although it is much tougher, and sure, it might not be built for everyone, it is encouraging that thought the most, and so that's my choice.
Right. Okay, time to move to questions. There are going to be questions here. Could we have, do we call for questions, or do we show that on the screen here? So the first one, does the IB allow for different pathways to university? I'm not sure I understand. Janza?
I'm not sure if I am capturing the question correctly, but the beauty of the IB system is that when you're choosing subjects at the DP level, or even somewhat at the MYP level, you have the flexibility to curate it to the subject and major you want to pursue at the undergraduate level. And in addition to that, you do have to take some core other subjects. So you have to take a science. So your different, does it allow for different pathways to the universities? Not quite sure who asked this question, and I'm not sure if I'm interpreting it correctly, but
Chandra, can I add on to that?
go for it, Ian.
Right, so if you've got the GP program, and you've got the CP program as well, right, the careers related program, and the admissions to the university, can you tell us more about that?
So in essence, as you were mentioning, Ian, you can curate it to the particular major you want to study at the undergraduate level. So it gives you, I think, much more flexibility. And this is in tandem with what you would see at the US liberal arts system, where even as an economist, I had to take a science. I took a biology. I had to take something in the arts. So it gives you variations to specialize later on. It's not locking you in, unlike the A-level stream.
Could we have the next one? Do you think universities will adapt to the new way children learn? Who wants to take that? Go ahead.
So, definitely, and they already are, right? So, Oxbridge, US colleges, all top schools in the world, reimagine they have systems built. So the US very famously has a core that they are adapting and changing according to the new ways that children think. They're offering you programs such as self-development skills through research or through internships at a much younger age, because they're realizing that students may need what students did. So universities are already doing it. The question is, how quickly can schools adapt as well?
Sorry, I'd just like to add on to that. There's actually a debate going on, particularly with regard to, and the way to measure this is standardized testing. And COVID really brought that into the forefront. Many universities in the US switched to SAT optional, understanding that we should evaluate a student in a holistic manner apart from just a one-off test. However, the debate is still not over because universities like the MIT, after remaining SAT optional for a good 3 years, reinstituted it this year. So, they are, the debate has not ended whether universities will continue taking the holistic student into account or a single test measure. So it's ongoing.
This is a more technical one, maybe. How does the IBCC, the Inter-Board Coordination Committee, I presume, how does that deal with IB? Is it at the same level as A levels, and how do they find the equivalence, etc.?
So for the A levels, they've already announced the matrix on what an A star is equivalent, and there has been a continuous, you can say, protest, and I think rightly so, from the OA level students that it hurts us when you make the equivalence. IB has also been very active in this front on getting the equivalence and has now come on par to OA levels. It's not at the, at where it should be, but I believe this is something the IB management in Pakistan is working on.
But it has been officially recognized, so people can go
Certainly,
to Pakistani
certainly,
universities.
yes, certainly.
Okay. There was a number 4, which was, it's gone to 5. Have a look at. So how do you, let's come back to 4 later because that's too broad. Go to 5. How can schools teach conflict resolution and stress management to students? Anyone?
Interesting I read before I came in today. The IB system, the person who imagined it, was this woman who lost the World War in 1948, sat and asked herself, how do we teach students to build and learn for peace? So answering that question, the IB system was developed off of that. I'll hand it over to you, Rob.
Just to add an aspect to that, I did talk earlier about how modular A levels are designed to teach people to be able to perform really well rather than just memorize really well, and therefore reduce exam stress because they're doing smaller modules. But more importantly than that, something that we've tried to integrate into our latest programs is what we call a transferable skills thread into every qualification, and the skills that are required for each qualification will vary. The mix of skills that you need to be great at physics are different from the skills that you need to be great at English literature, but making students aware, and it's not just for things like managing stress, but that's really important. We have 3 threads in our transferable skills, three aspects to the transferable skills thread. One is cognitive skills, so those are the traditional academic rigor, logic, learning skills. Second are intrapersonal skills, how you manage yourself. Now that's where things like managing anxiety, managing exam stress, the better you know yourself, the more self-aware you're trained to be. And this shouldn't start at O level or at A level. This should be starting to be taught in right through at primary level. That making students really, it's something that the IB does well with theory of knowledge, but arguably that should be being taught in right from year 1 of primary school, that self-awareness. And the third level is interpersonal skills. And that can be organized in the classroom by, instead of putting children and students in competition with each other for grades all the time, you make them collaborate, you make them work on projects together, you make them take turns, you make them negotiate, you make them aware of when they're over-talking and have to be quiet, or when they need to speak up and assert themselves, to be good communicators. That ties in with the things that I was talking about before, about what employers are looking like and not getting. So that this is a really important thread to promote right through every educational system.
And this, so we talked about the academic qualifications and the social and other extracurricular, but someone's asking what personal qualities make a candidate stand out among the vast pool of applicants for Ivy League?
That is actually very simple. The first quality that they're looking for is leadership. And that's what I tell students. It's not about just participation in any extracurricular activity. They're looking how you are taking or showing your leadership qualities. So for example, if you are interested in STEM or engineering, are you the president, the vice president, the general secretary of the organization? If you are, so leadership would be number one. If your school is not offering a certain club, and this is a question I get from students, my school does not offer this particular society or club, how do I show my leadership? Because the student council is perhaps 5 students, so how can I showcase my abilities? And now increasingly you can access international and national opportunities to showcase that. So for instance, if you're saying I'm an advocate of women empowerment, go ahead, sign up for Girl Up, which is part of a UN club, bring it to your school or take part in it regionally. So you have to look outside your school. So leadership is number one. Service is number 2, which particularly for some countries is more important than others. So different countries prioritize different things. Canada, a lot of your scholarship opportunities are directly related with service. You get bonus points, or if your community service is aligned with your academic passion. So for instance, if you're planning to pursue medicine, I would like to see you volunteering with Shaukat Khanum or Chuktai Labs in that particular area. If you're planning to pursue law, then I would like to see you volunteering, not necessarily interning, but in some sort of NGO where you are helping with legislation for minority rights or other cases. So leadership is the first quality, service would be the second biggest quality.
And the one that I had skipped, which was more general, somebody had asked, how do you choose a career?
You think about what makes you have fun. That's the closest and best way to do it. What do you enjoy doing in your life? What, when you're doing it, makes you feel consumed? What drives you to do better? And that can be anything from following a specific recipe in a kitchen and understanding how, for example, a toy car works. If you have fun doing a specific thing and you want to understand how to make a career out of it, go talk to Mr. Riley about it, or go talk to your correct teachers about it. Come see us about it. But first, find what you love, and then think about how to make it from there.
So this takes us to the very pleasant task on my part to thank all the participants. Those were the only questions we had, and I can see we're right on dot. Rob, Aisha, Chanzab, thank you so very much on behalf of Beacon House.
Thank you.
And thank you all of you for taking the time out and being here. Thank you very much.